Good evening, Doug. How you doing?
Good evening, Khalid. Good evening, Ms. Newsom. I see a few familiar-ish names here.
Good evening.
So just as we're settling in here, Ms. Newsom, how would you like to run this? We have our presentation. It's like substantially similar to what we presented during the hearing last month. Happy to run through, and then we'll do Q&A, or were you envisioning it a little bit different?
Given so that means we've seen most of it, correct? Only the additions that you've made we haven't seen. Is that correct?
Uh, for folks who are at the hearing or folks who have read the MGPP, you should have some familiarity. It's not, we're not putting out anything that hasn't been public for a little while. So up to you.
You know what?
I haven't seen anything. So,
Alicia, he asked me.
I understand, but I have not seen anything.
Hi, Alicia.
Alicia.
Hi. So I think that because this is a meeting, that we should see the whole project.
Alicia, since he asked me, I think that it's a meeting. You wait until I respond, okay? Let's do that. So
you should hear from the public before you make a determination of whether or not he should sit there and show half or all.
Once again, Alicia, he's waiting for me to answer. Once again.
We would like to see the whole thing. Thank you.
Is it online?
Yes, all the information is online. So I was thinking about, before Alicia jumped in, I was thinking about the individuals who haven't seen it at all. This is their first exposure. So if you can, but without, and this is a question, not you, Teresa. If you can show it, but still allow enough time for individuals to ask questions, not cut that time short, it would be greatly appreciated, okay? Doug? Hello?
Message received.
Okay. So if there's a way you can fix it so that we have a significant amount of time for questions. Because for the most part, people are going to be coming in with their own ideas, and we'll hope they'll listen. This is usually how it turns out. We hope people will listen, but a lot of times they've already heard gossip and rumor about what the project looks like. They haven't really seen it, and so they're going to be asking questions based on that. So if you can present a significant amount of time for questions, in addition to enabling those who haven't seen it to see it, it would be great. I don't know how you're going to do that, but it will be appreciated.
All right.
But you do understand what I'm asking, right?
Yeah, so my only question is, when would you like us to get started? Should we allow?
We can get started now, because it's 7 o'clock. Okay. And the meeting was scheduled to start at 7. And so if you're going to work with us and allowing enough time for questions, we need to work with you by respecting the people who came in on time.
All right, Ms. Newsom, let me.
Okay, thank you so much for asking.
I can figure out my.
Give me one moment. Yes, Teresa, you have a question before we get started?
Oh, I just wanted to see it. I want to read along.
Okay, we're getting ready to, Teresa.
Can you?
Okay, give us a minute.
Did I get an email for it? I can't find it.
I'm not sure, Teresa. I can't speak on that.
Is it on the website?
It should be, yes.
Right, I'm gonna look.
Okay, But Teresa, why don't you see the presentation so you can ask your questions from that point of reference? Okay, look at the presentation first and use the website to supplement what you feel you missed or you need additional information about. Okay, but look at the presentation first. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you can start now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Newsom. As I mentioned a minute ago, I'm happy to do the entire presentation, and we can make some time for Q&A after. My name is Doug McPherson. I'm part of the real estate and planning team at Empire State Development. I'm joined this evening by two of my colleagues from ESD, Kristen Jeffries and Angel Santana. And Empire State Development is proposing to modify its general project plan for the Utica Crescent mixed-use project. The proposed modifications we're talking about tonight were adopted by ESD's board on the 16th of February of this year, 2023, and tonight's just an opportunity for us to walk through it with you all. Members of the public, yourselves included, can review this modification and other documents related to the project at this web address. You can feel free to pull it up now if it helps you follow along. So, little overview: the Utica Crescent mixed-use project is part of Vital Brooklyn, a comprehensive New York State development initiative. Many of you are familiar with it, that addresses chronic social, economic, and health disparities in central Brooklyn. In November of 2018, New York State Homes and Community Renewal issued a request for proposals, or RFP, for the redevelopment of several properties, including the site of the proposed project, which is currently owned by the Kingsburg Jewish Medical Center, an affiliate of One Brooklyn Health. ESD is sponsoring this project in partnership with Homes and Community Renewal, or HCR. And in July of 2020, ESD, working in partnership with HCR, selected a development team led by Monadnock Development as the conditionally designated developer for the proposed project that's summarized in the GPP in this presentation. Our aims really are to advance the Vital Brooklyn initiative through the redevelopment of the site on screen. It's currently a surface parking lot. Many of you are familiar with it. And since the original general project plan approvals last year, it has been determined that a deed restriction that dates back to the 1940s inhibits the developer's ability to build on a portion of the site in accordance with the GPP that's currently in effect. Specifically, that restriction would prohibit multi-unit affordable housing, health, and community facilities on the affected location of the site.
Hey, Doug.
Yes.
Could you do me a favor? Expound, not so many. Explain the acronyms for us, please.
Sure. So far, I think I've gone through 3 acronyms. There's RFP, that's request for proposals. That's when we put an invitation for different.
I think we all know that one. There's another one that you mentioned.
The other 2 would have been, well, there are 3 actually. One would have been ESD, Empire State Development. That is the state's economic development agency. That is who I work for. There's HCR. That is the state's housing agency. It stands for New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And then there's a GPP. And a GPP is a general project plan, which is maybe the simplest way to explain a GPP is on the one hand, it's a description of a project that the state is trying to implement, but it's also a mechanism that we use to make land use changes on sites where the current zoning wouldn't provide for the types of uses that we might be proposing. So in the instance of this site, there's a portion of the site that's only zoned for commercial and residential wouldn't be allowed. So we had to intervene in order to allow residential on a portion of the site where it's not currently permitted.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, feel free to.
Because there's some people in the room who are familiar with this project, but they're not familiar with housing. So thank you for that. Okay.
No problem. So Today the project site address is 832 Rutland Road. It's in East Flatbush, kind of at the, near Utica, Rutland, and East 49th Street. The site is generally bordered by Utica Avenue to the east, Rutland Road to the north, and East 49th Street to the west. And then two properties, a house of worship, and then a private home border the site on the south. Site is currently underutilized. We're hoping that this proposed project will ensure that that condition doesn't persist into the coming decades. There's a lot on the slide, so we're going to spend a little bit of time on it. Utica Crescent is primarily composed of affordable and supportive housing, medical facilities, other community facilities, commercial space, and parking. The apartment sizes range from studios to family-sized 3-bedrooms, and all of the units would be affordable for households earning equal to or less than 80% of the area median income, while at least a quarter of the units would be affordable to households earning equal to or less than 50% of the area median income. 89 of the units would be set aside for seniors and are anticipated to be funded through the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative. Some of you guys know it by the acronym ESHI. And the proposed modification would make the following changes to the GPP, to the general project plan's description of how the building will work. The first proposed change would reduce the amount of square footage allotted to cellar parking while expanding the amount of allowable surface parking space. In terms of spaces, the cellar parking would be reduced from 64 spaces to 53, while the surface parking would expand from 25 to 39. The amount of spaces the project will create by introducing stackers to Kingsbrook Medical Center South Lot will remain unchanged from what was previously approved last year. And then overall, the number of parking spaces would increase slightly with the proposed modification. Maximum allowable residential, commercial, medical facility, community facility spaces would remain unchanged from the original GBP from what's been approved previously. The second proposed change we have would reconfigure the unit mix slightly, increasing the number of studio apartments while making slight reductions to the number of 1-beds, 2-beds, and 3-bed units. This change in the unit mix is a direct result of the deed restriction I mentioned earlier, which shrinks the overall footprint of the Utica Crescent residential building, which inhibits the construction of larger unit sizes without, increasing the overall maximum height of the project from what it is right now. Some drawings to illustrate the impact of the reduced developable area of the project site. The top of the slide shows the original building design with the area of the site impacted by the covenant's restrictions highlighted in red. So on the top of the slide, you're seeing the portions of our site that are affected by this restricted deed covenant. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the updated design, which removes the proposed development from the restricted area entirely and redistributes it to the residential tower that faces Utica Avenue. The modification would increase the height of the Utica Avenue tower from 9 stories to 12 stories, which would match the height of the tower on East 49th Street. Briefly to illustrate the modification's effects, how the modification affects the design at the ground floor level, this slide shows the original ground floor plan. And I'll give you a second to look at that. And then with the proposed modification, the residential lobbies become, a little bit better integrated, while the location of some of the community facilities and both the surface and garage parking entrances shift to different portions of the site. So in sum, the modification would maintain the same number of affordable units at Utica Crescent. We'd minimize impact to parking and other uses, and try to deliver the same high quality amenities and public benefits as the current plan without resulting in any significant adverse impacts. ESD's general project plan would override local zoning to, among other things, allow for that redistribution of bulk from the area restricted by the deed covenant to the residential tower on Utica Avenue, as we showed in a previous slide. And as a result, as I mentioned before, the Utica Avenue tower would increase from what is currently allowed, 9 stories to 12 stories. In addition, we'd allow like permitted obstructions, bulkheads, and like solar arrays as well on the top of the building. And this slide is a little bit more of a zoom in of the Utica Avenue facade that offers a bit more detail on the commercial space and what the pedestrian experience would look like. ESD has engaged with our partner agency, Homes and Community Renewal, or HCR, in a coordinated environmental review of the project in accordance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or SEQRA. Sorry for another acronym, but there are a lot in housing, unfortunately. And HCR served as lead agency for that review. An environmental assessment, or EA, concluded that the project will not have any significant adverse environmental impacts. And then based on the EA and various technical memoranda that have been reviewed and have like examined modifications that we've made over time, including this one, both HCR and ESD, continue to find that the project will not have a significant adverse impact on the environment and wouldn't require an EIS. So ESD currently expects construction of the building to begin later this year if everything goes well, and conclude by the end of 2025. And there's further details on the project overall and our next steps on the project website. So that's really all I had. Tonight's just an opportunity for us to have a dialogue. If people have questions about the project, if people have questions about the changes that we're making on the project, I'm available, and I have some colleagues here who are happy to discuss. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, and for expounding on the acronyms as well. So we're going to start, and since we have approximately 40 people in the room, we're going to give each one at least 2 minutes. Is that okay with you, Doug? Allowing everyone at least 2 minutes to ask their question or state their concerns. Is that good for you?
Let's you can run it like you need to, Ms. Newsom.
Okay.
So
we're going to try with that and see how that works out. If it appears as if a lot of people, or if we have time left over, then we'll see if any people have additional questions or comments, or if after the questions, you see that you need to make additional comments. Okay. We'll start with that. So I see the first hand up is Rod.
Yes, hi everybody.
Rod Herbert.
Good evening. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please be careful on the road.
We are able to hear you.
Okay, very good. I'm driving, so forgive me for the background noise. So the question that I have is, has a traffic study been performed with regards to the added vehicles that will be parked in the area? And the reason why I ask is that currently at the intersection of Utica and Rutland Road, during quitting time or end of business day at the hospital, traffic backs up on Rutland Road going west about, for the full block. So has a traffic impact study been performed to determine if that will be affected and how?
Got it. So the question was, has a traffic study been performed on the project? And I guess, it would be whether there's a study on the original project and a study on any of the modifications that we're discussing this evening. Short answer is yes. The State Environmental Quality Review Act requires us to do a traffic study that looks at how this project would potentially change traffic patterns that are experienced today. Right now, I don't know the number of parking spaces off the top of my head that are used by Kingsbridge Jewish Medical Center staff, but I think it's at least a couple of hundred. That doesn't really change with our project. The parking gets reconfigured, so those spaces move to a different part of the hospital property. But what we definitely analyze is what's additive. And if there are additional vehicles that will be coming in and out of this area as a result of the housing uses or the commercial uses or the community facility uses or the medical facility uses, that is something that we have to study to make sure that there isn't a significant adverse impact on this part of East Flatbush. The conclusion of those studies has been that the answer would be no to that. And we have to follow a very cookbook methodology for conducting traffic studies that's determined by the city's environmental quality technical manual. So short answer is yes. I gave you the long answer too.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, sir. You're breaking up.
Just wondering if it's available for public view. You can just leave us that information.
Yeah, I shared the original environmental assessment with Mia Hilton last year.
Is there some place we can go online? Is it on the same site where the rest of the information is?
No, we typically don't post environmental assessments to our site, but I have shared it with CB9 staff. So
okay.
You can contact the team, and they should be able to share it with any of the members of the housing committee or the board more broadly.
Okay, so we can do that. Thank you. Mikhail, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, Mikhail. Can you hear me?
Mikhail. Sure, we can.
Yes. Or Michael, I mean, if it's easier. I am an employee of Kingsbrook, and we have on parking lot, we have more than 200 spots. I mean, it's more than, I would say, more than 300 spots. And currently, parking lot being used also by Interfaith staff as well, because their parking lot, we're told, been remodeled. So my question is, if you can go in more details, that the new construction will not impair operation of the Kingsbrook, or if Interfaith still will be using our parking lot. If you can be more specific where the parking lot spots will be for us. Thank you. I'll listen.
Sure. I'm trying to find a good slide that might help with this discussion. So, Mikhail, currently spots that are located within this blue highlighted area, where your
Yes.
lot is, those spots would be most of those spots would be relocated to this area at the southern end of the existing super block where the campus is located along Winthrop Street. Similar to Interfaith, where they did an affordable housing project, shrunk the size of the surface parking lot, but wanted to maintain the number of spaces. What we would do here is introduce stackers, so we could use the same surface lot area, but increase the capacity of the existing lot by allowing, basically parked cars to be stacked on top of each other. It's been something that was implemented at Interfaith several years ago. Lorraine Brown, the president of One Brooklyn Health, she had experience with that implementation at Interfaith. She also has experience with stacker parking being implemented at other facilities from her time at H&H. So it's something that, the organization has experience going through. And my understanding is that the development team would, implement the stacker parking in such a way to reduce the disruption to operations, particularly at shift change to the greatest extent possible.
Yes, this need to be well coordinated, because the parking lot that you mentioned right now, which is management parking lot, at least 1/3 of this parking lot is closed right now because of remodeling and Brigade building.
Yes.
And
Sure.
right, and then the rest of parking lot is not empty. There is an emergency room there. There is management who is parking there. So and Interfaith I understand they're using stackers, but significant amount of employees been parking their cars at Kingsbrook parking lot. So this need to be well coordinated because there is significant amount of cars on both parking lots. And I mean, I don't know how high the stackers will be, but I mean, it will be very challenging, and hopefully it will be no interruption to operation of the Kingsbrook campus.
Okay. Thank you for expressing that.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome, sir. Jay?
Thank you, Ms. Newsom. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to first say my 3 questions, and then I'll after that I'll say comments, and if you can come back to the questions. The question is, number 1, can we get a copy of the deed that refers to the deed restriction so we could take a look at the language? Number 2, who are the approvals that are needed for? What departments have to approve this? Does Letitia James, the Attorney General, have to approve this? Because this may be a nonprofit. Letitia James has to approve the Kingsborough one. She's on that. So does she have to approve this one? And number 3, can I get a copy of the original project proposal that has a whole bunch of different details? I've been doing a FOIL request. I've been waiting for 5 or 6 months. The reason I want a copy of it is because the concept of community engagement, that was in the Kingsborough proposal. And this principle, I think, is important. It's said in the Kingsborough, which is another Vital Brooklyn project, as soon as you win the bid, you got to come out to the community and meet with them. And it's been almost like 3 years, 2 months short of 3 years. The community has been in the dark, and you've had all these different plans and meetings and everything, and the community hasn't had a chance to take a look at it. So also the comment period for this ended on May 12th. So we're coming here the first time, and the comment period ended. I put in my objections, but the community didn't. And when you had the plan, the second project plan was during spring recess. So that was totally wrong. On the parking, here's how it breaks down. There's 317 317 parking for approximately 317 vehicles. This is in the project plan. Approximately 284 of them are reserved for Kingsbrook employees. You do a little subtraction and you get 33 is the amount of spots for residents.
30 seconds remaining, Jay.
Thank you. 33 spots for people in the neighborhood. The amount of units is going to be 233 family units. That's 322 minus 89, 233. The supportive housing is composed of 4 categories. It mixes frail seniors also with homeless from the jails, from the prisons, and the psych wards. You take a look at the funding and it's there. Please go to my website, eastflatbush.info. That's www.eastflatbush.info. And you will see the environmental assessment statement that you've asked for. I have all the forms up there. Go to my website, eastflatbush.info. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Doug.
Sorry, just
Doug?
unmuting myself. First question, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So can we share the, can we share any information related to the deed restriction? I don't mind doing that at all. We can send that to the CB9 staff and they can distribute it as appropriate. The deed restriction is, I mean, it's part of an unfortunate history in the city and country of exclusionary deed covenants that were, very popular in the early and middle part of the 20th century. This particular deed restriction, in addition to restricting the development of housing beyond single family, also explicitly prohibited anyone other than Caucasians from living in these homes originally. That was the language from the 40s. Since then, obviously, the Supreme Court has taken action to invalidate those racially restrictive covenants from deeds. However, even though that particular provision is no longer enforceable, there are other provisions that are all, designed to make it more difficult for, certain populations to have resided in this community. So, and unfortunately, we're still dealing with it today. If it weren't for the deed covenant, we wouldn't be having this meeting, and the original GPP would have been adequate to execute the project. That's the first question. We'll get it to CB9, not a problem. Second question, does this Attorney General have to approve this project? The Attorney General doesn't have a role in approving any of ESD's actions in this project. If ESD were acquiring or disposing of property, then the Attorney General's office has to review, some elements of that. If the charity or nonprofit that's involved in a real estate transaction is selling all or substantially all, most of its assets, then the Attorney General may have a role in reviewing that. But this is just one of many properties owned by the One Brooklyn Health System, and so it doesn't quite raise to the level of a percentage of the One Brooklyn Health System's assets that would require the Attorney General to do a charities review of this deal. But I don't know whether the Attorney General has other sort of roles related to bonds or debt or whatever. That's not something that ESD has a direct involvement with.
And the last one?
And then the last question, can you get an original project proposal? I mean, I imagine if you requested the original project proposal from our sister agency, HCR, they should have it, and they'd be able to disclose it in a FOIL process. These are typically not things that we would make a regular practice of emailing out there in absence of a FOIL. It's just been our practice. So I understand that the FOIL process can be lengthy, but I would just beg patience with making the request, and they should be able to fulfill it. It's not something that's controversial for us to fulfill. A few other things. So 3 years, 2 months or however long you've counted before we've come to talk to you guys, we move as fast as possible at ESD. We do, but we do not come to you guys with half-baked, first drafts. We will come to, engage in a public process. We'll come to speak to the stakeholders as soon as we have something that is baked and that is, that we feel represents our current intentions for how our redevelopment will proceed. We don't think that it makes sense to show you guys things that are, wishy-washy or, shifting around. It's just not a good use of the board's time. And there's a lot happening in CB9 and a lot of things that you guys have a charter mandated role in. We're not going to take up your time on things you don't have a charter mandated role in unless it's productive to have the conversation.
Can I ask
a couple more points, and then if Ms. Newsom will allow it, we can do some follow-up questions. The comment period already ending, we did try our best to get on the Housing Committee's agenda for both a meeting date earlier in the month of May and April. We recognize that you guys are busy and sometimes you're not always able to accommodate us, but we did do our best to do a version of this presentation before the comment period elapsed on May 11th. And then I think that's it. So, Ms. Newsom, if you want to allow follow-up questions.
Can I say one thing? Can I ask one thing?
No,
one
Jay,
thing.
your
Just
2 minutes
5
have
seconds.
already expired.
But I just wanted to know if Catholic.
Jay, don't make
5 seconds, Beverly. You've canceled 5 meetings. You've canceled 5 meetings.
The next
You've canceled
person
5 meetings. Let me ask what 5 seconds. 3,000 to 19,000.
Alicia,
Catholic charities went from 3,000 to 19,000. Okay.
Alicia, you're next.
It's very disappointing to see, as Jay is describing, the fact that you're now bringing this project after the comment period is over. So I guess we need to be trying to figure out whose fault is that? Is that Community Board 9's fault for having 4 meetings that were canceled from the Housing Committee, and how we can fix that, because you have these projects coming in and we should have the right to speak on these projects and have a voice in these decisions, and yet you're coming after the fact. So I'm not sure.
So do you, Alicia?
Yes, I would like to ask a question, Beverly, if you would.
Okay, thank you.
But I would like to make my statement as well on the record.
Is that within your 2 minutes?
Now, I have a question about the fact that your original EAS, which I saw, and I didn't see any additional addendum to the EAS, you're actually reducing the parking by 106 parking lots from the existing parking. So you're actually reducing parking. Does the new proposals that you are now implementing, does that number get reduced, or is it we're still losing 106? That's the first question. The second question is that there's a major amount of MTA reducing its service lines all throughout New York City, all throughout Brooklyn and Queens. So almost 70% of the MTA bus lines, and there is no train lines around here, there's just bus lines and cars. Have you taken into consideration the MTA's proposal where they were reducing bus stops, which would then have a detrimental effect upon the residents trying to get to these facilities, and are you weighing in on that issue? And finally, there's the issue of the carbon neutrality amendments that are coming in. I didn't see in your diagram any, proposals, or maybe you have them and I just didn't see them. I didn't see it in EAS for you to comply with the carbon neutrality proposals, where they're going to put in, the facilities up on top of the roofs.
20 seconds, Alicia.
Can you stop interrupting me, Beverly? Can I just speak, please?
I thought you should know.
No, Beverly, you're interrupting me. Thank you. You're being rude.
5 seconds.
You're still being rude. And you're putting up I wanted to find out if you're pulling up solar panels, or are you going to be putting up battery storages in the wake of the carbon neutrality movement? And will these buildings be in accordance with the carbon neutrality requirements?
Okay, time is up. Doug?
Thank you for your questions, Ms. Alicia. First off, one of the things that was a priority for this RFP, since we were taking a surface parking lot from a medical center, was that we find a way to keep, to reduce the impact to their number of parking spaces. And so between the new spaces that will be introduced in this project in the cellar of the building, the surface lot next to the building, and through the introduction of stackers to the Bridger lot, to the south lot on the Kingsbrook campus, we would be providing 317 spaces per this project. That's what I know of what we're providing from, a parking perspective. On the second question related to service cuts in the MTA, I can't speak to it. I don't quite know what's happening on this corridor. It is what I do know is that there's an SBS line that runs up and down Utica. And then, there are other ways to get to the Utica Avenue station as well, just from my experience coming in and out of this area. Carbon neutrality, what I know is that HCR, so Homes and Community Renewal, the state housing agency, has been getting increasingly aggressive in, their requirements for high performing buildings. And this building will have to meet their latest and greatest requirements. Whether the development team is going to include a solar array on top of the Utica or East 49th Street Tower, I don't have confirmation on that yet. We are giving them permission to do so, definitely. But that is something that they're going to have to work out between them and our sister agency, the housing folks, over the course of the next few months between now and when the budget is finalized.
But you didn't answer my first question, and that was the EAS stated there was a negative parking of 106.
Yeah, I don't recall that. We can.
I just read it today.
Yeah, we can circulate the EA, and I'm happy to follow up with the technical memoranda as well that I mentioned earlier, which are basically like the kind of quote unquote updates to the EA in response to small tweaks to the zoning override that we're doing. I can share the tech memos with Dante and Mia, and they can circulate it to you. I don't recall the reduction that you're describing. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I just don't recall that in the EA text. And what is up on this slide is a representation of what the project aims to deliver in terms of parking spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Next person is, I apologize if I'm announcing incorrectly, Shaha Gonsberg.
Yes, that's me, Shaya.
Shire. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. I wanted to know, what is the community benefit for you to change the zoning and make the building taller? I mean, you're requesting for obstructions that are higher than the allowable height. I wanted to know if there, if this is for the community. The apartment sizes does not reflect this is a family neighborhood, and there's mainly studios and 1-bedroom apartments with very little 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And also, if you're making a building that's a larger, that's higher and taller than the surrounding, I wanted to know, is there a study on the scale and how it affects the surrounding neighborhood? Also, you mentioned that there was no additional adverse environmental effect, but I believe that if you're changing the zoning and making the building larger, not only it shouldn't have an adverse effect, but it should actually help the neighborhood, especially this area is prone to flooding when there's a lot of rain. And I was wondering if you're taking that into account, and if yes, how? And I just would like to reiterate about the traffic report. Please send that to the community so we could actually review and see how it actually affects, because anybody that lives here knows that a building that size and only 30 parking spots are going to be servicing this building, and while the rest is being servicing the hospital, that will have a major effect. No problem. And how that parking will affect the whole neighborhood, and also why did you remove parking spaces from the cellar as opposed to adding in the surface and keeping the same size in the cellar? Thank you.
Thank you.
Shaya, you are pushing my ability to take notes on your questions as fast as you're asking them, but I'm going to do my best. I'll try to answer the questions in reverse order. So why reduce the number of cellar parking and increase the surface parking as opposed to maintaining the cellar parking and increasing the surface parking? This is a direct impact of the deed restriction that we talked about a little bit earlier. That deed restriction basically cuts off, it slices off like a section of the building that was previously allowed, and that also impacts the amount of cellar space that we have available. So the fact that we can't build on that portion of the site that's affected by this restricted deed covenant means that we have fewer cellar spaces that we can deliver. However, the upside of that is that the fact that we're not building on that portion allows us to expand the surface parking. So we end up, having to reduce one and increase the other. But what ends up happening is that we squeeze out a few extra spaces by expanding the surface lot. Has there been a study of the scale? Has there been a study of stormwater and sewer impacts? There has. That's something that's included within the environmental assessment. So the EA document that we've shared with the board previously, as well as the technical memoranda, which have studied the changes that we've made from the previously proposed project to the one that we're coming back now to describe. And, in both cases, there's not been a finding of a significant adverse impact in terms of stormwater or flooding, or in terms of, like impacts on the public realm and shadows, that sort of thing.
Sorry.
We have to
my
we have to
question
follow.
was
If I
more
can
about.
finish, yeah, go ahead.
My question was more about: are you are you helping? Not that you're like not making it worse, which I'm concerned that you're saying there's no significance, which means there is some adverse effect. It's just not significant. I'm asking.
No, that's not what I
help?
said. No, that's not what I said. I didn't say that there were adverse impacts and that they were just not significant. I did say that there were not significant adverse impacts, but you can read through the environmental assessment to get a clear understanding of what types of impacts were looked at and whether they were viewed to be adverse as a result of the introduction of this project. Sorry to interrupt you there. I was getting to your first question, which is the last bit about community benefits and how does this actually make things better. First of all, like it turns a relatively underutilized surface parking lot into affordable housing. We're introducing 322 units of 100% affordable housing, all affordable under 80% of the area median income, a quarter of it available, affordable under 50% of the area median income, and 89 of it reserved for, seniors. In addition, there's a new medical space that will be used by One Brooklyn Health. They're still figuring out exactly how they want to program it, but this would increase the availability of ambulatory healthcare, walk-in healthcare within the neighborhood. There is a space for Catholic Charities. There is a retail space on the ground floor that is contemplated to be developed as a grocery store. And, we're giving them permission. You mentioned that the bulkheads and the solar array, we're giving them permission to install solar arrays that would, reduce the greenhouse gas and environmental impact of the building overall. So, we think that these things are beneficial. This is an RFP that was developed in consultation with local stakeholders and in advancing of this overall Vital Brooklyn initiative in Central Eastern Brooklyn.
Okay.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Daniel, you're next.
Hi.
Daniel?
Hi. So first of all, I find it very frustrating that there's a whole plan put in place at the last minute when it's very hard to do any rough drafts or any change really to it. That's not fair to the community that you're, changing the landscape of it physically. And I have to say that while everyone's very concerned about the environmental effects, I don't think anyone mentioned the effects of it physically to the people who live around here, to the people who are coming here. Okay, there's already a 700 bed supportive housing, whatever you want to masquerade it under, supportive housing or any of these other good terms. But bottom line is we know what kind of people are coming, which is a physical danger to the women who live here, to the kids who live here. It's not fair. One neighborhood cannot be a dumping ground for all these supportive housings or whatever feel good term that it wants to be called. There's way too many of those happening within a very small radius, which doesn't make sense. So that's number one. I don't think anyone has, like I'm reading, I was reading in depth a little bit today before this meeting about what's going on. It's frail, elderly, supportive units. Those who's coming there? That's not anyone that, a lot of them are a hazard to the people who are, to our children and other people who are walking around. That's number one.
You have 30 seconds.
I understand. Just let me say what I would like to say. That's number one. Number two is, why wasn't anyone told about it now until the last minute when there's very little that could be done to change it? And number three is that changing the zoning for such a project will further allow other builders to change the zoning, which will just not set a good precedent that's going to happen. Everything is going to be much higher, more condensed, and more, it doesn't work around like that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have anything to say
Doug,
about
are you ready?
I mean, I didn't really get much of a question there,
I didn't
My
but
either.
question
if I
is
can,
twofold. Number one is why were we not told about it until the last minute where you're just coming to share information? This is not a discussion of give and take. I listen to your idea, you listen to mine, and together we collaborate to come together with something. This is someone presenting information that it could not, there's very little that could be changed. Number two is we're happy that there's no environmental concern, but there is going to be a physical concern. In terms of safety, was there any crime study done? Did you speak to the local precinct to see how this will change anything? I don't think so. And there's a 700-bed unit coming, supportive housing or whatever you want to call it. Another one right here, this Utica Crescent. There's a bunch more proposed. I don't think any neighborhood has this many within such a small radius.
So you, Doug, you got that?
yeah, I think so. I mean,
Okay.
ma'am, what's your name? It's because it's not Daniel Wasserman. I'm
No,
No,
that's
it's
my
not.
husband. It's Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, Sarah. I think I read some of the same blogs that you
Just
do.
one more, thing, just one
Sarah.
more question. No, please let me finish. One
But
more thing. If
Sarah,
you do a study,
you
if
had
you-
2
if-
minutes.
I
and you
understand.
didn't say
If you
we've given you
listen,
an
just
opportunity
let me say what
to
I would like to
restate
say.
your questions. Allow him to answer.
Okay, I just want to add one more thing.
Allow him to answer.
Can I add one last point? If you look at the latest affordable housing, most of them, the units, a studio starts at 2,200 or whatever it is. You could look at the project that was just finished on Lufferts between New York and Nostrand. That doesn't help anyone here. If that's for a studio.
Okay, Doug.
Sarah, I'm not familiar with the project in Lefferts and Nostrand. From what you're describing, a studio at 2,200 would sound like a 421A project. This is not a 421A project. This is a project being developed using, state housing subsidy sources. And as I mentioned before, the units would be available to individuals making 80% of the area median income or less. I think it would be helpful to briefly describe, what frail elderly means in terms of supportive housing. 89 of the units in this.
Under homelessness.
Allow him to finish, Sarah.
Well, let's let us have a discussion about this, because I do not like the dynamic of people in your community being deliberately misled about, what a particular population means. First of all, frail, ma'am, I'm trying to address your comment. Frail elderly, first off, the first criteria is that you have to be a senior. So that would mean an individual,
that's not old.
An individual who is 55 or older. That is the age restriction imposed by New York State, who are enrolled in Medicaid and has either a chronic condition, physical disability, or needs assistance with one or more activities of daily living. That could be putting on your clothes. That can mean getting around, those sorts of things. So that is like
mental capacity.
One second. That's the first thing, where the requirements are agnostic on mental capacity. Second thing, you have to be in an acceptable living situation. Now, this could be someone who's unsheltered and homeless. It could also mean someone who is sheltered and homeless, but it could also mean someone who is in an institution like a hospital, a person in a hospital who doesn't have a place to. Ma'am, I cannot describe this if you're going to interrupt me every 5 seconds, please. If you are in a hospital, or if you are in a skilled nursing facility, or most people just call them nursing homes, you would be eligible for a frail elderly unit. Furthermore, if you are, let's say, doubled or tripled up, and you are interacting with the state for different sorts of social services, and you are identified as a person who has a tenuous housing situation, even if you have a roof over your head, if it's still risky, and if you are labeled to be at risk of homelessness, and many of us know people who are in these situations who are doubled and tripled up with, relatives or acquaintances or whatever, those are additionally people who would be eligible for, these units. So, these are people who we know. These are people, many of us have been in these positions. The suggestion that every single person who would be eligible for a unit like this is experiencing serious mental illness or is currently experiencing street homelessness. That is wrong. There is a broad swath of individuals who are Medicaid eligible and are 55 and older who would be eligible for these.
So how many units is for what you're describing? Out of the 200 units, how many are for the ones that you're describing?
There are 322 units. Of those, 89 would be.
So where's the rest of them? They were talking about over 100 plus more. Where's the rest of that?
I have no idea where that number is coming from. In this project, there are 322 units overall, of which 89 are set aside and income restricted for, frail elderly seniors pursuant to the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative. Now, that is not to say that, seniors are banned from, applying for the other units. Like, seniors are welcome to apply for other units in the project through the lottery. It's just that these 89 are age restricted and have these specific criteria attached to them.
Okay. All right, so it's not just, okay, I understand. Tuvia, if you have additional questions, Sarah, please go. Please raise your hand after everyone who's asking their question for their first question, then you will be called again. Okay, everyone's lining up who have additional questions. Okay,
thank you.
So Tuvia.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good evening. I also have more, I guess, statements and maybe one question at the end. So
Okay, but understand you only have 2 minutes, okay?
I understand I've been on to hear you say that about 5 times, so.
Yeah.
I do understand that.
I still have to
Okay, so let me
remind you.
talk and please don't interrupt me, so I don't use up my time. So my first concern mirrors Ms. Wasserman, is that having, I think you misrepresented some elderly, frail, you said at the end, and homeless. So my concern is this has become saturated in this area. Quiet. This has become saturated in this area of homeless, because homeless shelters on Rutland, this homeless shelter has been being built in East Flatbush. This has come saturated, and this is a New York City problem, the United States problem, not just the Crown Heights East Flatbush problem, and it should be distributed equally across the city where there's other places that has space. First concern. Second concern is the size of the establishment, whatever you want to call it, building. If you look at the residential buildings all around this area in East Flatbush, which I am a resident here, they're all 1 family, 2 floors, 3 floors the most houses, not 12 floors. Lastly, I have a concern and I protest that the earlier meeting that you had on April 12th was Passover, which I find that discriminatory to my religious beliefs, that you know that we have religious Orthodox Jewish people who want to be involved in the process, and then you exclude us from the process. And I think that was very, very insensitive and disrespectful to the Orthodox Jewish population. The last comment I have is it is a question regarding I looked at just before the apartments that are available. It says 80% of the AMI or below. So my question is there a base of how much below the 80% is? You have so it's 80% below the average median income. Can you define what below means? Because to me, the below without a baseline can be 1% up to 79%.
Doug?
Yeah, I'm just writing down a couple of things. Okay, so the last question, 80% or below, what is the base of this?
What is the base? What is the baseline?
For affordable housing, for any individual unit, there's sort of 2 numbers that you need to keep in your head. On the one hand is the income limit. So the highest income that we would allow to be in the highest income that we would allow to occupy a particular unit. And then the other hand is the rent. So for a typical lottery unit, let's say you have like a 2-bedroom and it's at 60% of the AMI, we would allow, someone earning up to 60% of the AMI to live in that unit, and the rent for that unit would be a little bit less, like 57-ish% of the AMI. for one of the supportive units, one of the frail elderly units, the income limit would be set at something like 50% of the AMI. That would be the highest income that we would allow for someone to live in one of the frail elderly units. But what your rent is would be dependent on what your income is. For the frail elderly unit, whether you make 50% of the AMI, 49% of the AMI, 2% of the AMI, your rent would be limited to a third of your income. And the voucher that you would get as part of the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative would pay the rest of the rent due for that particular unit. So that's kind of how that works. So people kind of get met where they are in that sort of system. If you're walking in with, you know, an SSI income or an SSDI income that, you know, puts you in the 30% or 40% of AMI range, you're only going to pay, you know, a third of your income in rent, and then the rest would be met by the voucher. If you have slightly more income, you know, it adjusts based on what your situation is walking in.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Michelle? Michelle?
Hi. Hi, my name is Michelle Rosenblatt. I live in the area. My husband used to work at Kingsborough Psychiatric for over a decade and happened to also be a real estate agent in the area. I just want to address the fact that, like, what are we going to do to keep, like many people have said and expressed concern. I feel like this has become a dumping ground. I have, I've seen a drop in sales because of the fact that people are getting wind of the fact that this is going to now be, you know, we have homeless shelters here, homeless shelters there, supportive housing here, supporting housing there. And I feel like we're just building up so much that it's going to destroy the single family homes in the neighborhood and really not allow, you know, much growth for that. And if we're making community residences, why are there not more bedroom community residences? Because we have, you know, if you're serving the community, a lot of the community, whether they be Jewish, whether they be Hispanic, whether they be African American, whether they be, you know, white people off the street, like a lot of them have children, and a majority of the units are not set up for families with more than a single person or, you know, two people. And those are my concerns, is there's not enough, you know, quote unquote, for the community as far as families go. We need more 3-bedroom apartments, more 2-bedroom apartments for larger families that need housing, that don't meet, you know, the higher income. I have many friends who are leaving New York because they can't afford to rent. Their income does not allow them to rent here in the neighborhood anymore. And that's my concern, is that there's not enough affordable housing for the community that already lives here, and that we're, you know, kind of destroying the skyline as it is. I mean, my corner, unfortunately, before we bought the house that we bought, I didn't know that they're putting up an 8-story building over here, you know, next to my house. So I would be very upset if I lived over there on Utica. Not to mention the fact that, you know, my husband used to work at the supporting residences on Lenox or Linden and 49th, and those mentally ill patients have caused a lot of problems in the neighborhood.
Okay,
as far
Michelle.
as safety. Yeah.
Doug, can you respond to that?
I'm not sure if there's a question in there.
My question is why
the comment.
My question is why are there not enough housing for the community that already lives here? We don't have enough family housing. There's a lot of 1-bedroom and studio apartments. Why is there not more affordable housing for larger families that live in this community already?
Got it. So, you know, my understanding is that this project is going to produce like 102 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units that don't exist currently. We would love to be doing more than that. You know, we have had the deed restriction that I've been, you know, describing throughout the evening that has made it more difficult for us to deliver more family units than we're able to without raising the heights, you know, beyond the 12 stories it's already allowed. So, you know, we're trying to do our best here and coming up with against a few headwinds, but trying to, you know, introduce a substantial number of new units and a substantial number of 2 and 3 beds as a part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Teresa? Teresa?
Yeah, okay, hi. I have a few questions. Number one, does your environmental study include the cumulative effects of the other Vital Brooklyn project at 681 Clarkson? That's number one question. Number two question is the community facility went from 3,190 feet to 19,000 square feet. That's quite a big difference. What is that for? Is it Catholic co-developers supporting housing service? What is that for? And I agree with the previous speakers that there was no meeting for people to comment like they were supposed to do. There was no housing meeting. That seems very deceptive to me, and suspect, and maybe even corrupt. So I'd really like for that to change, and for people in this community to be able to speak and be heard like they were supposed to be, not because something happened with Dante and there was no meeting, housing meeting. What the heck is that about? And I'd also like to know, like, I look at the plans and I see very narrow sidewalk and very little parking is going to be on the street. And you're also going to need bike racks, a lot of bike racks. You're going to need bike parking inside. I don't see any of that. I don't see any parking. So you're going to take the parking away and put in bike racks. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think you're going to take away more space with a bunch of garbage dumpsters. I don't see any plans for garbage. And I brought this up before. So that's my concerns. I want the street level to be clean and nice and respectful to the current community. And I want them to have plenty of parking. And I want the bikes to be not in the street, on the sidewalk or in the back. And a pool. I don't see any pool. We all need a pool in this neighborhood very badly.
Doug?
Thank you.
I feel like I do a lot of projects in Brooklyn, Queens, Upper Manhattan. I haven't gone anywhere where no one has asked me for a pool. So I was waiting for that to happen. It finally happened. Bike racks are required from zoning. So that'll be required to be included. Most of these buildings will include them in a cellar floor and have a bike room. Does the environmental study look at, you mentioned another address, 681 Clarkson. That's a project that's a little bit further down the line than this one. It's still in this community board. It's called the Kingsborough Psychiatric Center West redevelopment. This project's happening before Kingsborough. And so for its environmental review, we had to analyze what is going to be, what change does this project bring to the neighborhood? The Kingsborough environmental impact statement, which is in draft right now and will be released later this year, will look at what the additional impacts of that project will be on top of other recent affordable housing development in the area, including this Utica Crescent project. So since Kingsborough is coming later and its analysis is happening later, it's going to look at kind of the quote cumulative impacts. This project's earlier in the process, and so that's not something that we would do for a project that's like ahead of the line, so to speak, compared to Kingsborough. And then what is the community facility for? I brought up this community facility, the ground floor plan. So in yellow, you can see the open spaces. There are 2 community facility spaces. One is for a clergy group, I believe. The other is for Catholic Charities. And then much of the ground floor space will be taken up by One Brooklyn Health and their ambulatory medical facility, which is technically community facility, but they end up being the hospital ends up being the largest user of the community facility that's allowed.
Is that housing?
No.
That's like hospital beds?
That's a clinic space. It's not going to be like inpatient beds. Like no one's going to stay there overnight. It's going to be a place where folks walk in and get medical services and leave.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Doug. Shavi? Shavi?
Yes, hi. Yes, hi. Thank you. I actually am quite surprised that the community didn't hear about it. Maybe is the first thing that's totally upsetting. But the fact that even Community Board 9 wasn't given another time. Yes, there was issues that came up and the housing committee couldn't meet, but you keep dancing around this. I must have heard already 10 people saying, why wasn't the community told? And I'm not even sure if these questions are going to matter, because it seems that this is like a done deal and you're just coming out and playing this, okay, I'll explain what's going on, but it's a done deal type of thing. I'm not sure what that means. The comment time has passed. I mean, the entire thing is, as the previous person said, seems very suspect. And you haven't answered one person why we have it. So I'm only going to ask one question, because then you kind of answer all the other questions and you kind of conveniently forget this question. So I'm going to only ask one question, and actually two questions. First question is, why were we not told before this is a done deal? And the second question is there any type of security that you have set up for this building for the safety of the residents and the safety of the community? Two questions, and I'd like to have answers for both.
Thanks, Javi. On the security question, there will be 24/7 security guard. That is something that needs to be in any building receiving supportive housing funds like this one is. So that is a person who is making sure the residents are, that there aren't any issues in the building. That's a person who has their eyes on the street. And it's something that's become best practice. It is essential to making sure that these buildings operate well and that they're, good neighbors in the communities where they're located. I mean, I don't quite know how to answer the previous question. Like, the Vital Brooklyn Initiative started in 2017. That was announced as a governor's initiative within the area. This site was identified as a site that would be redeveloped under that initiative in 2018. In 2020, we selected a developer to implement the redevelopment. That was announced. There was like a press release, and then after that, we've gone into a process of understanding how to make this project as beneficial as possible to the community, and to work through how to take what the developer's original proposal was, and enhance it in the ways that we thought were necessary before beginning a public process that started last year. And so last year was the first time we had a public process. We sent out public notices. We had a hearing, and folks had an opportunity to comment on the original proposal. The original proposal was ultimately approved. Some months go by, we find out about this deed restriction, and then that is our reason for having to come back to have further discussions with you about tweaks that we're making in response to the deed restriction. So for me, I've been working on this since the original selection 3 years ago. We have had conversations with the community board. We have had conversations with local elected officials. We've been out there on this. But sometimes the work isn't done perfectly, and there are people who find themselves not in the loop as early as they would have liked to. So,
So is there still opportunity to have discussions and make changes?
I thought that's what we're doing.
Okay, no, I'm saying because it seems that whatever you can pretty much explaining, well, there's 300 and something parking spaces, and everyone keeps saying, yeah, well, that's not enough. As Mikhail said himself, he said there's 300 plus parking space right now for them, and it's pretty much full because they share it with something else. So how is your new parking lot gonna be sufficient? This is, and you keep just saying, well, this
so
is
one
how
of the
many parking
things
spaces we have, but
we haven't gone into a ton of detail on this. The hospital and the development team have been engaged in a study process to understand what the parking need will be after this project and another project across the street are completed. They're doing renovations and reconfigurations and changes in the types of services they're providing at the hospital. And the end result would be as a result of changes in the types of services provided, there may not be as high a parking need as there is right now. That is something that's like currently being studied. And so we're not assuming that, you know, we're going to be looking at a higher parking need in the future. We're thinking, if anything, there might be a reduced parking need in the future, but what we're conservatively doing is providing, you know, a similar number of spaces to what had been, you know, proposed earlier. And, you know, that's something where, like, I'm not the best expert on that. You probably need to talk to someone at the hospital to get a clear understanding of what their plans are. But, you know, our understanding is that the future parking needs and the changing in service needs on the hospital campus is something that they're constantly looking at.
Okay, and the last thing was the height of the building that you didn't answer. About 4 people asked you about the fact that it's going up to 12 floors, and that the surrounding area till right now that it's a residential area, even the commercial area of Utica Avenue, I'm quite familiar with that area. There are no such buildings that are that height, and how it affects the neighborhood. And I understand that you get to have more residents in the building, and that's really what you're looking for. But you have to also look at the benefits of the people that live there, and you're not addressing that at all. The fact that it's 12, and it's obviously rezoning in order to get that, and you're not addressing how that will affect the entire community. And there's a very diverse community there. We're very proud of that. We have all different shapes and sizes there. We're very proud of that. We're very happy with that. Crown Heights is a diverse community, and we all stand the same. We really, I think, feel all exactly the same about the height of this building. I mean,
I don't have a response to that other than, you know, 12 stories is necessary to achieve the amount of density and the amount of affordable housing units as we're currently proposing. Like, we couldn't produce the same number of units with a building half the size. It's just
and thank you for your comments. Okay, Alicia, you're next.
I just wanted to point out, because it's in the EAS, it's on page 7 for you, Doug, where it says very clearly that you would do. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. You reduced the parking spaces from 420 to 314, and you haven't actually told us why there was such a major reduction in the parking spaces. Also, you talked about cumulative impacts. And so for people to understand that, cumulative impacts means that when a project is about to be done, they're supposed to look at what effect it's going to have and any projects that are being proposed. So Doug is trying to say that this project, which came first, was not supposed to look at the second project, which is coming, which is exactly wrong. The SEQRA, the state SEQRA, demands that you look at anticipated development projects that are coming into the community that will affect the same resources in the same neighborhood. So again, the question is, why have you not done a cumulative impact? Because the community keeps saying that there's a bunch of these projects all happening in the same area, affecting the same space. And it's going to have a major impact on this community. And yet none of these projects, your project, which should have been done, a cumulative impact, because you knew about, and that's the key in the EAS, the environmental assessment, is that you have to know that a project is coming or a development project is coming. You knew that. SEQRA says that if you know, you're supposed to take that into consideration, and you have not done a cumulative impact. So again, I'm going to ask you again, Doug, why have you not done a cumulative impact when you knew about the other potential negative impacts that will be happening from the other development projects, putting them all together and then saying, oh my God, look how many residential development projects are we putting in this neighborhood?
Thank you, Alicia.
Miss Alicia, I have to say again that, we are going to examine what the additive impacts of this Vital Brooklyn project, the Vital Brooklyn project across the street, and the upcoming Kingsborough project in the environmental impact statement for Kingsborough, which will be released later this year. I am conversant in environmental review. I'm not fluent in environmental review, but I can, as our team put this together and work with consultants to do the analysis for this project, they determined that, what they would look at in terms of, additive impacts and what they would not. For Kingsborough, I know that we are going to be taking kind of a broad look at all of the anticipated developments that are happening, nearby. I'll also say that, the environmental assessment for this project has been coupled with the environmental assessment for the Kingsbrook Estates project, which is across 49th Street, and ESD is not involved in doing an zoning override for that one. That one's proceeding as of right. However, because that project is also being implemented by the same developer, HCR is involved with both of these projects. They're across the street from each other. They're both happening on the same hospital's property. It was determined that we did have to look at those two in coordination, even though it's sort of coincidental that the same developer is taking on both projects, because they were related enough. Now, some of the other Vital Brooklyn projects that are happening in this community are being undertaken on different timelines by different developers on different sites owned by different entities. And so that did not, the differences between this project and those was enough of a reason for us to do different environmental reviews and look at them differently. Now, again, I'm conversant, not fluent in environmental review. Our team had to look at whether to combine the Site K proposal, the Utica Crescent proposal with other things. It determined that it was necessary to combine Utica Crescent with Kingsbrook Estates, given the commonness and developer ownership of the current property and HCR involvement. But that is not something that's been extended to every state involved project happening in Board 9 or in Central Brooklyn.
Well, the secret specifically states that it doesn't matter if it's a different developer, as long as the same resources in the same community is affected by the proposed developments. So whether or not you got the same developer going on, or you got the same stuff happening all over the community. You got residential development, you got senior housing, you got homeless housing, you got mental illness housing, you got social services, you got basically the same stuff happening all over. And you're now trying to get out of a cumulative impact analysis by saying, oh, well, it's a different project. It's a different person. It's a different developer. When in truth, the state secret specifically said it does not matter. As long as the same resources are being affected by these developments, you are supposed to take it into consideration. But we definitely will hold you to the statement that you're now making the claim that the next project is going to take into consideration this project, because that would then give us grounds for a lawsuit to file against these projects for not doing cumulative impacts, which are supposed to be done. Thank you.
Have you made all your comments in regards to this, Doug?
You didn't answer my question about the reduction in the, I showed you the page on page 7 of the EAS.
Miss Alicia, I've done my best to look at, the transportation chapter and the parts that you're describing. I am not seeing the conditions that you are describing to me.
Okay, it's D.
We can, again, we will make all of
J on page 7.
We will make all of the technical memoranda and the environmental assessment available to, the community board staff. They will share it. If there are any questions, if there are questions, we can, address them and we can route them through the community board
D2J on page 7.
as we have
on
dealt
page
with
7.
questions that have come from members
Malka?
of this committee before.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Doug. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Malka, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah,
Okay, you're next.
thank you. Okay, so
You're
I have a
welcome.
few questions. First of all, from what my understanding is that there's going to be 322 units, 89 is reserved for the frail elderly. That leaves 233 units, not for the frail elderly. So I wanted to get a better understanding of what type of people would be eligible for, to reside in those units. What are their backgrounds and what type of people are they? That's my first question. My second question is, you said 89 units are going to be reserved for the frail aides. You said one of the criterias to be considered a frail aide is not being able to like dress yourself and have a hard time with your day-to-day living. So I'm assuming that these 89 seniors are going to need to have some sort of aide living with them, or are they able to live independently on their own? And if they have an aide, are they going into a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom? My next question is, you said that public notices were sent out to the community. When and how were they sent out? Was it in a form of a letter, of an email? Because I live in the community around the corner and I have not heard about this until today. My next question is, this affordable housing, is it for people living within the zip codes in the area, or are they for people from other boroughs or possibly other zip codes? Is that a criteria to be eligible to be chosen to live in affordable housing? Are we taking people from within our own community, or are we taking people from outside communities? And my next question is also, are there going to be criminal background checks done on these people? If yes, and they do have a criminal background, will they be allowed to reside in that building because they simply can't afford regular housing? Someone mentioned the MTA. I feel like that was not addressed properly because as it is, the B12, B17, there's not enough busing and they're always full to capacity on a regular day. And for adding all these people inside this thing, does that mean that MTA will be providing more busing more frequently? And my last question is, our rights as a community, is there a way to prevent this from going through? If as a community we are opposed to it, is there any chance for this to not go through?
Thank you.
And one last question. You said there will be security, 24/7 security. Is that armed security or just a regular security guy? And I want to know if the NYPD, are they going to somehow be involved at any point of the planning of this building? Thank you.
Malka sets the record for the most questions asked in 2 minutes, so I think she gets a prize after this. The new units, who are they for? So as I mentioned before, they'd be available to individuals and families at or below 80% of the area median income. If you meet those income restrictions and you meet certain asset restrictions, you can apply. That's, that is the universe of eligible applicants, and it would be a lottery conducted through the Housing Connect process for the non-frail elderly units within the building. Your question about where can they come from, are the units for people from the community or not? It has typically been the state HCR agencies practice to set aside units for the community board in which a project is taking place. That has been their practice. Whether they continue that practice on this project, I don't want to speak for HCR. I know that the elected officials have been vocal that they do want units for individuals from CB9. So that's about as much as I can say on that. You mentioned for the frail elderly units, like since it is a threshold requirement that they need assistance with one or more activities of daily living, does that mean that they need to have a live-in aid? Absolutely not. Like, there are plenty of people who need assistance with ADLs who do not have like a 24-hour like live-in home health aid. How were notices sent out? So we are required to post a notice in like a paper of general circulation. We typically post our notices in the Daily News. We also will post our general project plans to our website. We also, before we can have any, public engagement, like hold a hearing or submit something on our website for general public comment, we have to have a board meeting where the ESD board authorizes us to do these things, which are, those meetings are open to the public. Those meetings are online. People are able to come to those meetings and offer comments if necessary. So that's sort of another touch point that we have. And then in addition to all of that, it is our practice, like whenever doing a GPP in a neighborhood, to blast it out to a variety of different stakeholders, including your local elected officials who can, further disseminate the information, as well as, city officials as well. I don't have the full list in my head, but it is extensive, and it does include the community board as well. They were notified as we were moving forward in this process. Criminal background checks. I do not know the answer to that question. I think that would be a question for, my colleagues at the housing agency. I just don't know what the practice is around.
That's the most important question.
And unfortunately, I am not the person who's expert in that area and who can answer that question. So I apologize for that. Have we studied busing and MTA? If you read the environmental assessment and the technical memoranda, impacts on existing public transit resources were part of what is studied in that process. And so things like the B12 or the buses along Utica being overcrowded, if this project is going to substantially exacerbate that situation, that would have been something that was studied in the environmental assessment and something that you guys can feel free to review. And then there's a question about like what the community's recourse is. We have, we had our comment period. We'll go back to our board and address any negative comments that substantive negative comments that we've gotten on the modification that we're making. And beyond that, I really couldn't advise you.
Okay, I also want to know is the security guard in the building going to be armed? And does the NYPD have any say, or will they be involved for security purposes? Because crime has gone up in the neighborhood, and between me and you, we know that a lot of these people do have criminal backgrounds.
I don't know what you're implying. Are you talking about the people who would live in this building potentially?
Yes. I want to know if
You're
the
implying that
NYPD
they would
be an
have
extra
criminal
presence, an extra
backgrounds.
NYPD
Okay.
presence. That's what I want to know. Does the NYPD have any involvement in this planning, or they're excluded?
I can't speak for, how the NYPD deploys its resources in this precinct.
Okay, and you said that all public housing has a security guard. Are they armed?
Public housing.
Public
Before
housing.
you answer that, Doug, this is not a public housing project. Please define that term, public housing.
Well, you said that many projects of this type have a security guard 24/7. So I just want to know if that security guard will be armed or just wearing a vest.
This is a regular a housing development project.
Okay, and my last thing is I do want to also say the fact that the meeting took place on Passover. I find that discriminatory, and the fact that the comment period is over, and based on that comments that came in during that period, decisions are going to be made. That was unfair because the public was not made properly aware of the comments period. So the community is at a disadvantage right now.
Okay, thank you for your comments and your questions. We are now at 8:33, and I see of all the hands that are raised, there's only one that hasn't already asked a question. So I'm going to skip to this person, Schooner's iPhone. I don't know. Do you understand? Do you know who you are?
Yes. Hi, how are you? Schneider Gopin.
Person whose hand is raised that has not asked a question. So because we're at meetings in, you have 2 minutes to state your question. Do you still have a question or a comment?
Yes.
Do, then you will be allowed 2 minutes to do so.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we're able to hear you.
Okay, I know everyone's been talking about the cumulative environmental impact, whether or not they've included that or not. Can we get it included? Is there a way they can do a new study? Because the very definition of environmental impact, I would think, would be how it affects, the local environment. And if there's another, I don't know, 700, 800, 900 beds being proposed, that should definitely be taken into consideration.
And
So-
do you have additional questions?
Yes, and my second question is, which kind of ties into the first question, is if we can somehow maybe do a residential bed analysis by census tract. I know this has been done in other census tracts in the past, where we can kind of see if there's an oversaturation of any specific housing type being done here, because this might lead to a segregation issue. And based on it's a fair housing issue, really, if there's an oversaturation. So instead of speculating, maybe we can, have some sort of study done, have some sort of opinion done, and then we can give that to the public. And those are really my two questions, I guess.
Okay.
Instead of going back and
Doug?
forth, if we can have these two studies done, and that would really give us clarity as to where we stand.
Okay, thank you for your questions and your comments. Doug,
Thank
are you
you.
able to respond to those?
Sure thing. And also just want to say thank you, Ms. Newsom, for convening this group and giving folks an opportunity to let their voices be heard in the project. We are happy, even though this meeting is about to end, to address any questions that come into the community board. If you and your staff want to compile things and give us an opportunity to talk them out as the project moves forward, we're happy to do that, and we're also happy to help you guys get the word out closer to marketing, should the project move forward and there be new housing opportunities available.
And along those lines, Doug, before you answer that question, do you have a public email that, because there are 51 at up to one point, it was 60 people in the room, and most of them are just listening to the questions that have been asked. Do you have an email that, or do they send directly to the community board and the community board forwards to you? Because Khalid is in the room. He's able to reiterate that if that's the case. Or pass that forward to Dante and Mia, if that's the case. So people who have questions, but for whatever reason didn't ask their question, or they were just listening, is there an email that they can submit their question to?
Yes, I'm sharing one now. It's on the screen. It's uticacrescent@esd.ny.gov.
You're going to email that to the community board, right?
Khalid, let me know if you need it. We can follow up after
Thank
this
you. And
conversation.
everyone, he says it's on
Yep.
the screen. Could you write that down, please? So, because I understand out of 59 people, we had approximately 10 people ask questions. So I'm sure there are more people in here that have questions. So please feel comfortable to email, because Doug wants to hear. It's important for the success of his project, if I understand correctly, right, Doug? So would you answer Schuner's question, please?
He had two, and Schuner, I'm gonna ask for forgiveness. I forgot the second one, but let me answer the first one first.
Okay.
With respect to this cumulative impact question, first off, it is not just me at ESD. We have a team, we have environmental consultants, we have attorneys, and we work in partnership with our housing agency colleagues who have resources of their own to analyze how we need to analyze the environmental impacts of projects like this one. And we have followed their guidance. They have said the two projects across the street from each other need to be analyzed together. There was a debate about that, but it was ultimately decided that that was the best way to give the public a clear, depiction of what the, environmental impact of development along, East 49th Street would be. And that's what we did. We did a study that looked at both projects together, even though they're going to be developed on different timelines and potentially not even within a year of each other. So that is how they decided to handle the scope of the environmental review for this project. They have decided not to include projects that are being conducted in other neighborhoods or, several avenues over from this one within the same neighborhood, within the same environmental review, they deemed that those projects were not related enough. Their criteria for making those designations is, driven by the State Environmental Quality Review Act, as well as the different regulations that, are used to implement that act. So, I understand that they're not on this call. They can't speak for themselves, but, that is the conclusion that they've come to. I have to trust their expert opinion as they move forward. I can definitely let them know that you think their expert opinion is not correct, but there was a process.
I don't think it's not. I just think it's concerning and it's not accurate.
There was a process to figure out how this would be scoped, and similarly, there's a process to figure out how subsequent Vital Brooklyn projects will be scoped for their environmental reviews, and we will do this by the book. It is our job to do it by the book. On your second question related to the fair housing analysis, I'm now remembering that's what it was. That's HCR's job. HCR's job is to look at the particular building programs that we're bringing to any community. It could be East Flatbush, it could be the Upper East Side, it could be Harlem, it could be Far Rockaway, and to determine whether, as a result of the building program that's being proposed, there's a potential for a fair housing issue. For this one, they've looked at it a few different ways. There were some earlier iterations of the project where there was concern that there might be possibility for certain things, but the project that we are bringing you is one in which we're confident does not present a fair housing issue with respect to the population mix, how the marketing will work.
Are those made public?
This isn't like, it's not like a report, like it could honestly be two lawyers having a conversation to understand like what the building program will be, and whether that sets off a fair housing alarm bell for anyone. I've been assured by my housing colleagues that is not the case. And again, it's an area where
there seems to be a lot of concern just from everybody speaking tonight, and I think that these two issues, they were made public. First of all, the cumulative impact between both. I think Alicia mentioned earlier that it was inside of state statutes. But first of all, that and this study on the fair housing was made public. I think that level of transparency would really just make everybody feel a lot more comfortable.
Again, like I said, there isn't a report. It could just be.
But if we could put that together, that would alleviate a lot of these concerns.
I understand. And again, on the quote unquote cumulative impact issue, I have to trust that the folks who are more expert in the State Environmental Quality Review Act than I am have analyzed the issue and have an approach to looking at the environmental impacts of this project and several other projects throughout the community.
Right, but it was specifically omitted.
Let me finish. That follow the requirements of the act and any other associated regulations. I'm reasonably confident they've done their jobs well, and that they have scoped things correctly, and that the approach that we've adopted, which was looking at this project in Kingsbrook Estates simultaneously and aggregately, was the correct approach.
Right, but they're specifically omitting the project directly across the street, and there's reason for concern.
No, that's incorrect.
I'm talking about Kingsborough West. Kingsborough West, not Kingsborough.
That's not across the street. That is in
Kingsborough West is across the street. It's right across the street.
That's
I live
incorrect.
right here.
That's incorrect.
It's just a block up. It's one block up. I mean,
that's not correct.
All right, it's irrelevant.
I appreciate the point you're trying to make.
The point is that it's being.
We are all, one moment. We're all in this room to receive information. That's why we're looking at a 9 o'clock stop, because everyone in here, Doug has the information. We're seeking the information. So he's basing this huge, he and his team have researched this for now, we're looking at 3 years. The deed restriction has changed, was implemented. That's why we're looking at some changes. But to argue whether it's across the street, on the same side of the street, that's taking up valuable time. One voice, ask, answer, answer, please.
Okay, I'm going to finish off. In short, it seems like it's being specifically omitted, which is a reason for concern. And we'd like to have the environmental impact included and some sort of study made public as far as the fair housing and segregation goes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for the concern. Doug, you have any additional comments?
No, I just appreciate anytime I get a chance to talk to folks in CB9, and yeah, thank you guys for taking time out of your evenings to listen to us talk about something happening. For many of you, it's in your neighborhood. And again, you know, if there are further questions, you know, we've done this before where we've had like someone from the CB9 staff put them all together in a document and get them over to us, and we can take a look through and try to clarify anything where there may be misconceptions or need for clarification. We're happy to do that again. So, you know, you have the Utica Crescent email, the members of the board team have, you know, Kristen's contact information as well. Like,
okay,
we're happy to, you know, continue to dialogue with you and you know, make sure that we're addressing ongoing concerns that'll between now and when the construction finishes. Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for your detailed explanation. Thank you everyone who showed up tonight, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for your concerns and all of that. Khalid, did you write down Doug's email address?
Yes, I have Doug's email address. I just want to say thank you everyone for joining tonight. Thank you, Beverly, and thank you, Doug, for the insight on this project. Any questions can be directed to our board email at bko9-1@cb.nyc.gov. And our phone number is also 718-778-9279.
And is there anyone in the room that would like Doug to put the email up once more?
This is being recorded, so you could always look at the YouTube video for the email also.
Okay, thank you for that reminder, Nicholas. Doug that's right. That's a good point. Thank you, Nicholas. I appreciate that reminder. Thank you everyone for coming. We're now looking at 8:45. If you think of any questions as you're nodding off tonight, any more concerns that you want Doug to address or his team to address, because he's the spokesperson, but I understand there's a whole group of people behind him. So please reach out to the community board. Please use the email address that he provided to us with any additional questions or concern. Once again, thank you everyone for showing up and being passionate about your community and the issues that you think are relevant here. And have a good night, okay?
And thank you for